Hello and welcome to a new episode of Interpreting India. From geopolitical complexities to economic uncertainties, India faces critical challenges in its quest for a more prominent role on the world stage. This season, we at Carnegie India continue to bring voices from India and around the world to examine the role of technology, the economy, and international security in shaping India's future. The reform of India's armed forces has been a long pending challenge for several decades, with various governments attempting modernization of various aspects such as equipment, defense industry, jointness, and civil military relations. The past 10 years have also seen a significant push, with measures such as the establishment of the Chief of Defense Staff post and the move towards setting up integrated theatre commands. These reforms become all the more necessary given the geopolitical churn in the international order today, India's own strategic imperatives and rising security challenges, as well as changes in the character of war brought on by emerging technologies. Joining us today to discuss this topic is Lieutenant General Raj Shukla. Lieutenant General Shukla is member, Union Public Service Commission, Government of India. He served as General Officer Commanding in Chief of the Indian Army's Army Training Command, or RTRAC. He has under his belt over 4 decades of distinguished service in the Indian Army. He was also honored with the Param Vishisht Seva Medal on Republic Day 2021. A strategic expert and accomplished public speaker, he has an abiding interest in strategic military affairs. He is a distinguished fellow at the Center for Land Warfare Studies and has been elected to the Executive Council of the United Services Institution of India. General Shukla, hello and welcome to Interpreting India. It is a pleasure to have you with us, and we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you for the opportunity, the invite, and it's a great pleasure to be on it.
Thank you, sir. I'll start off with a broad question, sir. On military modernization, before we look ahead to what needs to be done, perhaps we could take stock of the past 10 years, the successes as well as some of the challenges. And I'm sure we will get into the details of some of the issues that we come up with, but this just a general overview if you could give us.
You see, the general sense is something like this. India's attitude towards defense and national security since 1947 has been somewhat ambiguous. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. Even if you go back to 1961-62, our GDP was near level of that of China. It was somewhere, I think, $51 billion with the Chinese, and we were around $49 billion. Our per capita GDP was better than that of China, which means the average Indian was richer than the average Chinese. So the point that I make is that even when the economic situation was rather level or favorable, we chose to deprioritize our defense when it came to the Chinese. And we saw the horrendous costs in 1962 when the economy was put back by about 2 to 3 decades. Then there have been, times when we have prioritized national security. 71 was a grand success. Under Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, we went on a defense spree, spending spree, and the military kind of rejuvenated. So there have been these crests and troughs. But by and large, when it comes to the national security space, we have disregarded the rate of change in the rate of global change. Of late, we have started responding to the change. But if India is to step up into this, the big league, if not big power competition, we have to start driving our national security papers. That is what wise and competent nations do. So that is my argument. Now, if you take the last 10 years, we must admit that there have been some game-changing reforms. And I would like to present them as the boldest, most comprehensive reforms since independence. Let me just flesh it out for you. Look at CDS DMA. For years, we said that no, we did not want a CDS, we would become too powerful. And there were all kinds of arguments offered. In the past, many times when we were pretty close to a CDS, for example, during the era when the Naresh Chandra Committee was set up, in the last government. For 5 years, it recommended a CDS, and then we spent next to 5 years torpedoing the very exercise. Now we have a CDS, and if you go into the frame of the CDS, it is far more powerful than Barry Goldwater Nicole. Almost everything is the remit of the CDS. It's a very powerful CDS. This whole DMA bit must be understood. For 30 years, I have seen these debates whether the ministry could have, 4 or 5 officers, and the question should be, no, they can be two majors, nothing more than a major. This was the kind of agreement, or this was the kind of thought. Not even let army officers into the MOD. Army officers into the MOD. And you now have a department. The CDS is an empowered secretary. TMA. Now, if you see this is a game-changing reform. It is also a game-changing reform from the lens of the civil-military relationship. Post 47, in India, the civil and the military grew up in silos. The metaphor was one of control, civil controlling the military. In most mature democracies, the civil and military streams interacted vigorously to ensure strategic productivity. That's the way it should be. In a mature democracy like India, there is no question of there being a coup or something. So we are past the days of the coup, and now the civil and military must come together in the interest of strategic productivity. China has taken it to a new level. They talk of fusion, civil-military fusion. In consequence, the Americans are now embracing civil-military fusion. So these, the days of control are absolutely over. It has to be civil-military fusion, which has also begun now in the last 10 odd years. So that is the second reform. Look at Atmanirbharta in defense. So far, we relied totally on the defense PSU. Now, the record of the defense PSU is uneven, mixed, and in many areas disappointing. We have to acknowledge that. And one of the reasons it's disappointing is that they were monopolies. So things like the Tata Airbus deal will help to smarten up HA. World over, national security has advanced due to innovation, energy, and enterprise. Look at Ukraine. The people being talked of are not Boeing, Lockheed, not DARPA. It is Palantir. It is Alex Karp. It is Elon Musk. It is an AI startup like Helsing, which has become a unicorn in Ukraine. The entire national security endeavor is being driven by innovation, energy, and enterprise of the private sector and startups. So, in that sense, Atmanirbharta in defense this time is different. It has been infused with a new energy. Look at our new normals in our strategic outlook. Balakot and Kailash were not perfect, but they were a very distinct departure from the past. The message to our adversaries is clear that, listen, if you mess with us beyond a point, we shall react, and we shall react with calibrated, sophisticated military power. So in all these areas, the syntax and grammar of the military and national security has changed. So in my view, we need a national security makeover. The edifice has been laid, but it is not yet complete. Given the massive challenges before us, only the edifice has been laid. And now we must work on this edifice to complete the national security. If we do not complete the national security makeover, we will be back to square one. Because do understand, unlike other fields, in national security, there are no winners and runners up. You just have to win. So this argument that we were better than last year is a valid argument, but it is in another sense it is an incomplete argument. We cannot be better than our own selves. We have to be better than China. And we know that China is a formidable threat. It is a force to reckon with. So I will just end by saying that in the past, we let global change in defense and national security bypass us. We have now begun to respond, but it would be far better and wiser if we can drive change. See what kind of strategic military futures we need. Do not copy flopping Western models, dump those models which don't make sense to us, and drive a change in the strategic military domain according to the Indian genius, according to our needs in our national security interests.
Right, sir. So, you listed a bunch of reforms that have been taking place over the past 10 years. You had the CDS, you have changes in civil-military relations, jointness, defense industry, and also calibrated uh, escalation.
Saab,
So,
if I may just add one more point
yes,
uh,
sir.
in this reform. Look at what is happening to ideation in the national security space. Raisina dialogue today is shaping foreign policy conversations. Similarly, the Chanakya defense dialogue, you had the Indo-Pacific Army chiefs meeting here last year. This will begin to shape national security policy. Uh, in the future, why not have an equivalent of Shangri-La? Why should national security conversations be driven by debates in Shangri-La? Why not India? We are not only a major player, we have also, pretty complex strategic challenges before us. So even in the ideation space, significant steps have been taken, and they should move ahead. So even these kind of initiatives, Carnegie could become a formidable reasoned voice on national security.
Right, so I think this increase in ideation and especially civilian input does speak to the increasing civil military integration that you were mentioning. So you mentioned that one, we need to be driving change, and the national security edifice sort of needs a makeover, which brings me sort of to my next question. Now, looking forward, what are the reforms the government should either introduce or sort of make progress on, especially as you had mentioned, given the changing nature of geopolitics, the rising China challenge, and changes in the character of warfare?
So, in my view, the challenges are twofold. And let me put them this way. One is the enormity of the Chinese military juggernaut. China could turn out to be a lot of fluff. We know it has a lot of problems, corruption, so on and so forth. All this is good news for us. If it is actually corrupt, if it is fluff, uh, we need not bother. But there are many aspects of the Chinese military transformation. For example, the strategic support force, the rocket force. Uh, I'll give you just one piece of data. In 2004, Chinese military capacity, Chinese industrial capacity value added were half of those of USA. Today, Chinese industrial capacities value added are twice that of the US. And look at the consequence. In the military industrial complex, American studies conclude that the Chinese military industrial complex is 5 to 6 times more efficient than the American military industrial complex. And Ukraine tells us that military industrial complexes matter. A CSI study tells us that the mighty Americans don't have 7 days of precision munitions and missiles to fight in Taiwan. Who's taking note of this? Z. Look at what this whole, response of the West to the conflict in Russia, in Ukraine. From 2004, there have been various indications, speculations of what Russia might do in Ukraine. So we have that kind of lead. But the slow motion response that the West has conjured in the military space is to do only so much so as to lose, not to win, what people call slow motion response. So I'll give you a figure here. Uh, Before Advaita was surrendered, which is about 4 to 5 months back, a stock taking was done of 2 Ukrainian brigades. One brigade had 15 artillery rounds left. The other had 42 mortar rounds left. So was Advaita lost or was it abandoned? That is the question, and we are talking of the mighty West. So my argument runs something like this. Clinton in 1992 said it's the economy stupid. meaning that, no matter how the global circumstance changes, ultimately it's economy. Today, under President Biden, their inflation is down to 3%. Their inequality levels have been decreasing for the last 4 years consecutively. Uh, Unemployment is not too bad. The American economy is doing pretty well. Yet Biden has the lowest approval ratings for any American president in recorded history because he has not handled the national security domain with competence. Americans are asking, why spend $950 billion, have 800 bases, 11 aircraft carriers, if you have to give us this opera of failing deterrence? Act 1 was Afghanistan, Act 2 was Ukraine, Act 3 is how the Iranians and their proxies have dealt with the American military. Act 4 could prospectively be Taiwan. Now, in the Indian context, while the world is moving from economy stupid to national security stupid, Western nations are talking of draft. NATO is talking of making the floor spending 3%. They're talking of draft. Uh, Europe is talking of rejigging its economies into war economies. Russia has already done so, which means that national security is becoming central and the arc of conflict is bending from Europe to West Asia, maybe to Asia, closer home. We are enjoying this peace dividend, but I'm saying let's make use of this time and pace and scale to step up our military preparedness, make our strategic military apparatus more robust. Because come 2028 or 2029, if we are faced with a conflict situation with China, we should not regret that we did not do enough when we had the time. So I'm saying that geopolitics is trending in different ways. I'm not saying that conflict is certain. It is very probable. But the best way to prevent conflict is through deterrence. I'm not making a case for war fight. If we spend on deterrence, we shall ensure that war doesn't happen. Now, people say that deterrence is costly. I say wars are costly. Ask the Ukrainians. So that is my whole argument, not to jackboot around the world, not that I'm inching for conflict. I'm making a case of wise deterrence. And when we look at our gap with China, there are areas. Let me just finish this argument. In my view, I think there are three areas. One is territorial combat, LAC, LC. They need mere reinforcement. We should be careful, we should be watchful, but they need mere reinforcement. It is two other domains. One is strategic deterrence, and the other is power projection. India has to do far better in the realm of strategic deterrence and power projection if we are to meet a sophisticated strategic military challenge like China. So territorial combat is okay. It is in these two areas which have been our traditional areas of weaknesses because we haven't been thinking that way. We have been thinking small. In other areas, we are thinking so big. IMEC is from here to West Asia to Europe. We are talking of that other corridor which runs through Thailand and all to the east. And we are talking of linking all this. Now, as our foreign policy aspirations grow, as our economic aspirations grow, our economic flight must be calibrated with the span of our strategic stride. That is the point I'm making. If we are getting so ambitious in other domains, the strategic stride should not lag.
Right, sir. So you spoke about needing to do better on strategic deterrence and power projection. So what would be the sort of concrete on-ground reforms in the armed forces that would help sort of achieve these two objectives or go towards them?
So let's talk of strategic deterrence. Look what happened on the night of 14th April when that Iranian barrage was fired at 330 missiles, ballistic, cruise, drones of all kinds. See, firstly, it was kind of a gamed response. The Israelis were told, the Americans were told, कि भाई हम fire करेंगे, देख लेना. They were American interlocutors in the know of it and so on and so forth. Yet, what did it take to degrade or disrupt that barrage? Iron Dome, Arrow 2, Arrow 3, David Slingshot, American Aegis destroyers, US fighters, British fighters, the sensors of the US Military Defense Agency, Missile Defense Agency, MDA, space based intel interception, a massive AD enterprise enabled interception of that rocket barrage. The Chinese rocket force is far more sophisticated. It is a cutting edge force of long range precision. Once again, in 1995, I think when the Chinese acted smart over Taiwan, Clinton dispatched two aircraft carriers and the Chinese backed off. That was American power. Today, Admiral Paparo is telling Biden that don't send the aircraft carriers, they'll get sunk. They'll be sunk. This is the power and precision of the Chinese rocket force. Against such a rocket force, I think we need to upgrade our AD framework by an order of magnitude. Now, this kind of strategic depth. If we have to upgrade our AD framework, it is not only AD, it has to be integrated across three services, integrated with space, integrated by int. So it is a different way of looking at things. And in tandem now, even if you have such an AD framework, you will need a response paradigm. That response paradigm, our response paradigm today is primarily structured on piloted fighter aircraft and mech forces. These are not a utilitarian political response. So the world over, people are investing in missiles, drones. So this drone missile complex, a sophisticated drone missile complex, is something that we need to set up in the strategic realm. Power projection. The Chinese Navy is a 400 ship navy. It is trying to break out of the first island chain, but when it does so, it is inevitable. In 10 to 15 years, Chinese naval power will be there in the IOR. It already has a 70 to 80 deterrence. The Gwadar port, I mean, all indications are that the Chinese are going to leverage it militarily. It is going to enhance their presence in the IOR. So, should we not take a decision today to use the Andaman Nicobar commands to project power across Malacca? If we take this decision today, it will take 30 years to flesh it out. There are other areas like long range stealth, deep precision strikes. So it needs an entirely different look. The way the three services have been trained, the way they have focused professionally in the past is along the LAC and the LC. This is an entire new arena. It will need a cultural rejig. It will need a strategic rejig. It will need a change in outlook and then the capacities. Now, perhaps something is happening in this domain, but not at the pace and speed. This whole transition to digital combat. I mean, today it's pretty apparent that globally militaries are moving towards AI. AI needs investment in data, in compute, and in algorithms. I don't think the Indian military is pretty well poised in these domains. So these are the areas where we need to invest in, we need to focus on, and if we do that, China is not an irrational power. Even if it sees these things happening, what we may call asymmetric deterrence. And see, in any case, we cannot match the Chinese ship for ship, jet for jet. Their defense spending is $500 billion, rather not even $100 billion. So it is these technologies, asymmetric capacities like AI, which may be the secret sauce in the successful deterrence of China.
Right, sir. So lots to chew on there. You spoke about the drone missile complex, emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, and also the sort of military industrial complex and declining stockpiles. Which brings me to my next question on defense industry in India. So, where are we today in terms of the defense industry, and if I go deeper in terms of indigenous research, development, design, manufacturing, as opposed to, let's say, simple assembly. And I think one anecdote uh, to sort of frame the question I have here is just we spoke to some drone suppliers and manufacturers in India, and they told us that the biggest problem is that there's no budgets for research and development, and therefore the models and frameworks they get are either open source or Chinese, and they're not really designed for sort of the extreme climates that India's forces have to face, let's say along the LOC or the LAC. So just using that as an anecdote, where is Indian defense industry today, particularly in terms of research and development?
So if it is research and development, DRDO's whole purpose is research and development. Whatever its budget is meant for research and development. But unfortunately, DRDO has got into this business of churning out guns and all that. It is not their business. So I think the DRDO reforms which are going on will focus the DRDO to research on technologies of the future. Now, it is a very deep problem. Look at our IITs. We have 20 to 23 IITs. We haven't had a single Nobel laureate from the IITs in the last 50 years, or even somebody who's won the Turing medal and all that. IITians, many of them are looking for government jobs. So the very institutions which were supposed to do R&D they have been, whatever the reasons, they are not focused on R&D. So they should start focusing on R&D. And the other problem is the civil military divides. I gave you that data on industrial capacities and the military industrial complex. Unless the broader industry grows, this will not happen. Now, coming to the military space, see, we have done some structural corrections, and I said that the AID is a wonderful Atmanirbharta in defense is a wonderful transformative step. I am now quoting to you the Prime Minister who said कि भाई आत्मनिर्भरता in defense का उद्देश्य है to liberate the forces of innovation, energy, and enterprise from the scourge of process and procedure. नियमों का जाल. There is such a niyamo ka jal that R&D does not happen. What should happen? We need cultural transitions. Where will money for R&D come? Apart from DRDO and these ITs and all, it has to come from the private sector. Once the private sector sees profit in defense, it will spend on R&D in defense. How will they see profit in defense? Two things we have to do. We have to make cultural transitions. The tyranny of L1 has to stop. L1 is a general principle of GFR. It does not apply in the military space in the West under the rubric of what they call national security exceptions. So national security may know L1. It has to be guaranteed orders. Now I tell you how it can be done. We need a new way of looking at military business cases. For example, say today the military decides it wants to do drone swarming. And it will use drone swarming, say, for counter-attacking armor. Now you've got a military case. You pick up one corporate major, one startup, and one foreign collaborator, say an American collaborator. And these people, they now converge on your military case. They say, okay, this is the military case we agree on, and they jointly evolve a military business case. Now there is a four-pronged commitment to this military business case. Now nobody steps back. All four work on this with guaranteed orders. That means when this technology evolves, there will be guaranteed orders to these startups and these corporate majors in a kind of shared enterprise. And how do you select these people? How do you ensure probity? You have IDEX, you have so many channels to sift all this. But there has to be guaranteed orders. If I tell Sahab that, listen, you got a company, you can make guns for me, but no orders are guaranteed. 10 years later, we will see whether you fit the L1 bill. You will make all the right noises, never put your money. This is what is happening in India today. So these cultural transitions have to take place. All countries in the West, most of the others I know of, Japan, South Korea, China, USA, they have what they call national security champions. So Sahab is a good chap in the media space, in the military space. You're a good startup. I identify you and I promote you as a national security champion. So that is the way. There is an intimate connect. You know you will get these orders. If you know you will get these orders, you will start looking futuristically in that space. So you will start investing in R&D. अभी तो आप if I tell you कि यार आप आराम करो 10 साल तक फिर L1 में हम फाइल निकालेंगे एक देखना देखे क्या हो. So these cultural transitions have to be made, and this is what I call we should not copy flopping Western models. This L1 whole business is flopping Western models. It will take you to that example I gave you. A brigade will have 15 artillery rounds and 42 mortar rounds. So this whole Atmanirbharta in defense has taken off well. It now needs these cultural transitions. And you are absolutely right. It has to be R&D. We have to overcome the tyranny of L1. See, this whole business of innovation and startup is predicated on risk taking. It is predicated on failures. No GFR allows for failures. It has to allow for failures. I have to say the first line in the repackaged DPP should be that in the military space, failures will be accepted. Failures are not a crime. Now, these are all cultural transitions which, that need to be made. And in the larger sense, academia, institutions of wealth creation, and the military have to come together. The research will come from academia, which means you need high-end institutions doing high-quality research. And the research which happens there, the technologies that are produced, will infuse these creators of wealth. So companies which create wealth and also invest in the defense enterprise. And some of the profit that they make from it will go into nursing our instruments of power. Durga. So ये जो सरस्वती, लक्ष्मी और दुर्गा का मिश्रण है, this is a good metaphor to bring together various stakeholders so as to, infuse our national security capacities with vigor and the spirit of deliverance, not slow motion response. Just do so much so that you lose. It has to be enough to win.
Right, sir. So, yes, it seems like you're talking about a cultural transition where the stakeholders who are involved in this, be the armed forces, the industry, academia, research, they need to be speaking to each other a lot more and being sort of cognizant of each other's imperatives.
Guaranteed orders, national security champions.
Right.
This is no charity. Otherwise, people will make all the right noises in seminars and go and put the money elsewhere. This is exactly what is happening.
Right. So this sort of dialogue brings me to my next question, which is on civil-military relations. Anit Mukherjee wrote a book titled The Absent Dialogue, which is basically on the state of civil-military relations in India today. And there have been some changes and reforms, as you've mentioned, on that over the past 10 years. So if we were to sort of take stock today on the state of sort of the civil-military interaction, where would it be today?
So see, civil-military relationship is a very sacred kind of concept. What does it say? Look at the real theories of civil-military relations. They guarantee the superiority of the civilian. But the civilian is who? It is the political principle. So when it comes to the political principle, civil-military theories say that the civilian is right even when he is wrong. The civilian has a right to be wrong, which means the military, after some discussion, it can only salute and obey. Look at those overarching principles. So the civilian supremacy is guaranteed. Now, when you flesh out these theories, you have the political principle and you have two agents. There is the military agent and there is the bureaucratic agent. The military agent is somebody like me. Bureaucratic agent is, say, the defense secretary. Now, how it got skewed in the past was that the political principle chose to deal with the military agent through the civilian agent. So the defense secretary became all powerful. And the generals were pushed down the, what shall I say, the power or the importance frame. And there the skew started. There the problem started. What has now happened is that the military and civil agent are treated equally with the political principle. In that sense, Anit's absent dialogue has changed. There is a lot of dialogue. Let us be honest. Today, the political principle is ahead of both the military agent and the bureaucratic agent. He is telling you reform, make theater commands. We are saying we need more time. He is saying do this. We say we need more time. So it has changed greatly, if we have to be honest. The onus of execution is now on these agents. All the things that we spoke about, uh, cultural transitions, the other stuff, that is the prime minister is not going to do that. He has spelled it out. Now it is for us to do it. Now, I also understand that there are problems. A system which has been working in a certain manner for so many years, the change is not going to be instant. But the civil military relationship, its overarching frame, has changed greatly. It has been restored to what it should be. But now look at for the challenges for us. When you create a CDS, you now need to have officers who can operate with competence in the strategic military realm. It's no longer about tactical stuff. But for years, we have been so familiar with the tactical stuff that there are deficits in the strategic military space. So it will take time before you train your officers who can operate in that space. The Indian Air Force has started a very good program by the present Air Chief called WASP, Warfare and Aerospace Strategy or something. It's a program being done in CAPS here, as also in the College of Air Warfare in Hyderabad. I've personally gone there, where some 10 to 12 officers come in small groups and they read a variety of books from The Future Is Not What You Think, that kind of stuff. So it will need a vigorous streamlining of professional military education to create a new crop which can deliver on the civil military needs of today. But the civil military relationship actually lies at the heart of national security. And there have been major changes in it. Ultimately, national security is not a military endeavor. There is military, there is defense, and there is national security. Everybody has to come together. That startup is as important as the platoon deployed, say, in Arunachal Pradesh. Unless including thinking, including ideation. If Carnegie becomes this real super think tank and raises the right issues on national security, they will drive national security better. But for years, we have not been used to doing that. Let me also ask this honest question. We had people like K. Subramaniam in the past. Who is his successor in modern times? Subramaniam was the first chap who advocated, and this is Mr. Jaishankar's father, first person who advocated for a CDS. When the bureaucrats, his fellow bureaucrats, raised fears, he said the CDS will strengthen civilian control. This was farsightedness. Civilians who understand the military, when they write on the military, they resonate with the military. They prick the military's conscience. This is the kind of civil military. So we read everywhere in ideation. If Sahab writes on military matters, I should respect Sahab's writing on military matters. They resonate with me. So actually, the debate was never civil versus military. It actually became a debate of mediocrity versus talent. So we need talent from all domains, whether it comes from civil, military, private sector, startup, technologists. If they all come together, who was the person who drove strategic military thinking in America? Andrew Marshall. He advised 8 presidents across the aisle. Who was he? He was not even a national security specialist. He was basically an economist of near Nobel laureate credentials, that kind of economist. And he got into the national security space. And he played a big role in changing American thought. So civil-military relationship is sacred. It has got great opportunities, ideational, structural, cultural, and of course, operational delivery. I think we have moved in the right direction. And now we have to fill in these various voids. But absent dialogue, I think now is a thing of the past.
Right, sir. I'll just say here at Carnegie, the goal is always to make good interventions in this.
I'm only encouraging Carnegie, and I'm saying you're just a a symbol of what can happen. Carnegie doing some great stuff here. I must say that, and therefore I come so many times on your programs and all that.
Right, sir. So you mentioned the civil military dialogue. You mentioned that the civilian side is actually being a lot more active and there is a push. And this brings me to a more sort of tactical and doctrinal uh, question, which is you referred to Balakot, you referred to Operation Snow Leopard on the Kailash ranges. So, what were the sort of lessons at the ground level, tactical, doctrinal lessons from such operations? And I'm particularly thinking in the context of the India China standoff, the lessons for early warning, ISR, readiness. If you could tell us a bit about
So, see, the lessons are like this. Uh, the lessons begin from a larger question, and that is where do you position your military in your strategic calculus? Now, if the threats are grave, the military must move center to that calculus. When the threats are not so grave, it can become peripheral. But today, uh, one of the biggest challenges globally is China. China is a challenge for USA. Unfortunately, it is our neighbor. If China was resident in Latin America, we could safely spend 0.5% of our GDP on defense. But unfortunately, China is here. Now look at this. China's defense budget this year grew by 7.2%. When its economy, people say, is growing at less than 3, some say 2, some say half. Why is China spending so much on defense when its economic growth doesn't allow it to? Are they callous? Are they stupid? Look at India. We are growing at 7 to 8%. Our defense expenditure is less than 2% of GDP. Now, people say that's not the right equation. I am saying, whatever your equations, if we are spending $95 billion and he's spending $500 billion, when we can afford to spend more, are we being wise? So this whole argument, ना जब पैसा होगा देखा जाएगा, अरे पैसा कभी नहीं sufficient होगा. आपने ये देखना है, are you spending enough to secure yourself, to deter? अगर आप नहीं करेंगे तो वही हो सकता है जो 62 में हुआ कि आप पैसे बचा रहे थे डिफेंस के लिए and the military reversal through your economy back by 3 decades. Now, this is the refined kind of thinking that we need. This is the kind of thinking that we need as we step into this big part. And that brings me to the second question. The military is an instrument of deterrence and of use when deterrence fails. So when Pakistan does Pulwama, our deterrence is failing. He is daring to do it because he, before that, knew that our responses would either not be there or they will be weak. This time, when you sent air across, and it not only, there were times in Kargil, respected people like Air Commodore Jasjeet argued that if you employ air power on your own side of the LAC, it may go to nuclear escalation. I think he was in gross error. This time, we took our air power across POK and hit Balakot. So the message went to the adversary that this military is not to be encased forever and never used. Now, as our foreign policy gets muscular, our military instrument must be in better shape. That is the same argument for power projection. It is not to jackboot your military around the world, but to develop sophisticated, calibrated capacities of restraint to be used when your national interests so dictate. As Chanakya said, अगर शास्त्र को भूलोगे तो अपनी संस्कृति खो दोगे. And Shastra doesn't mean anything religious. It is a deep understanding of your civilizational texts. पर अगर शस्त्र का त्याग करोगे तो राष्ट्र ही खो दोगे. Where you position your instrument of force in your strategic calculus. You see, India's strategic outlook is driven by a duopoly. One is Vasudev Kutumbakam, जो एक बड़ा अच्छा भाव है. It is a very good expression to say that we look at the world in an integrated manner. But we must also never forget the words of Swami Vivekananda, who said that the world is but a gymnasium where nations come to make themselves strong. That is the reality of the world. So while Vasudev Kutumbakam is a good idea, you need to de-risk it through investment in your strategic military prowess, through a military prowess. So if you do that, you will have a military which is sophisticated, technologically enabled, calibrated, and the ultimate instrument of restraint to be used only when your adversary messes with you beyond a point. And that message goes across. A similar message went across in Kailash and many other incidents thereafter. So this is my whole argument, that we have to have a military which meets the threat spectrum, is of the requisite sophistication in accord with our strategic needs. This business of 2%, 3% GDP is actually respectfully a pack of nonsense. The Americans spent 50% of the GDP on defense in World War II. In the Cold War, it varied from 6 to 9. In the Reagan era, 9. So people spend on defense according to their needs. हमारे यहाँ पता नहीं एक धारणा बन गई है, and nobody has questioned it, including scholars like you. 2% of GDP. Where does this fancy figure come from? So we must spend on defense if we can afford it, and in order to secure our territorial integrity and our deterrence.
Right. So we've been talking of deterrence. I wanted to come to nuclear deterrence now. So you mentioned how China's, sort of rapidly increasing the size of its military arsenal, and the nuclear aspect is definitely a worry there. We had a recent commentary from the head of the Strategic Forces Command, sort of hinting that uh, perhaps India's second strike capability would need some reinforcing. So my question is China's nuclear buildup a threat? And are we sort of responding to this by bolstering our nuclear deterrent?
Saab, in the 1990s, when I was a colonel, the nuclear debate in India was very informed and very rich. We've had some of the sharpest debates I've seen. Raja Mohan, Uday Bhaskar, Air Commodores Justice, Manpreet Sethi, very informed debates. Maja aata tha wo sab sun. Today, the debate is dead. And to me, it seems pretty uninformed. Therefore, we need to revive the debate, especially because the Chinese nuclear capacities have broken out. They have changed greatly. Our nuclear paradigm, which was created in 2000, 2001, when we set up the SFC, was very good for that time. But the whole nuclear firmament has changed by leaps and bounds. Look at China. China today, at one time, had only counter value capacities, which means they were inaccurate missiles to strike cities. It has now developed counter force capacities, which are accurate enough to take on military deployments. There are two dimensions to China's nuclear capacity. One is for deterrence, in operational deterrence uh, in the operation spaces around. So first island chain, second island chain, Guam, India. And there is the strategic deterrence, which is signaling to the American mainland. The number of silos are increasing, warheads are increasing, precision has got better. Our deterrence is in kiloton capacities. There is a megaton capacity. All these areas need to be revisited. Mr. Raja Mohan has written a lovely article 3 weeks back on this business of how our nuclear paradigm is outdated. He's a former director of Carnegie. Ashley Tellis has written a wonderful book. I think 4 or 5 months back I read it. He's also put a piece in the Foreign Affairs of how we should look at China's deterrence. So my view, the nuclear paradigm needs to be fundamentally revisited. in terms of signaling, in terms of transparency, in terms of structures and capacities. It needs a major rejig. Even look at this NFU business. The NFU has, there are a lot of, sensible drivers for the NFU, but the NFU against weaker adversary is understood. NFU against a more powerful industry is merely a moral argument. It doesn't do any nuclear signaling. Look at the Israelis. When they were asked, do you have an NFU? They said, we have an NFU, but we will not be the first to strike, but we may not also be the last. Nuclear signaling is about ambiguity. Our whole paradigm is structured on transparency. It is my belief, I may be wrong, there are experts wiser than me, we need to make a transition from transparency to ambiguity in doctrine, in signaling, in structures. So I'm saying we must revisit the debate, and if we still feel that not much change is required, it is we may do that. In that context, even a second look at a renewed look at our second strike capacity may be enough.
Right. So there's definitely the imperative. There was a report today that China's nuclear arsenal is 3x that of India's. So are we sort of responding? There's definitely an imperative, but are we responding to it, let's say, through MIRVs, through more warheads that are in sort of a ready state, through deploying missiles like the Agni 5? So are we responding to this imperative? Is there a recognition and is there a response?
See, all nuclear postures will be driven by the quality of debates, by the force of debate. Look at how did our nuclear paradigm evolve. पहले हमने एक peaceful nuclear explosion किया. And there were many who felt that that was good enough. It was a signal to people कि भाई काबिलियत है फिर करेंगे. They argued against something like the 1998 blast. There was a whole argument against it. It must go to the credit of Mr. Vajpayee. I think in a 13-day government, all he did was the blast. When he did the blast, India's foreign policy moved to a new dimension. You suddenly got respect. There was a time, I remember there was an article in Times of India. It was headlined, The Wallflower and the Dance of the Dinosaurs. And the argument was that India was a wallflower. Nobody asked us for a dance, especially the two powerful dinosaurs. Because you didn't have muscle power. Moment two things have, pushed our foreign policy to the next level. One is, of course, liberalization, the market, and so on. And second is the nuclear blasts. उस टाइम लोग का आर्ग्यूमेंट था कि bomb, there'll be a bomb in the basement. You don't need to go for overt nuclearization like setting up a strategic forces command. And when a threat comes, we'll pull out this bomb from the basement and do it. Now, this is all related to readiness levels. There is an argument there that, the people want to separate the missile from the warhead so that no jingoism occurs to prevent a rogue occurrence. But you have to carefully calibrate readiness with these kind of safeguards. If you need higher readiness levels, these kind of safeguards will have to be re-examined. Look at this, a lovely book, The Nuclear Wall by Annie somebody. It's been written recently. The whole, in the Russian-American context, the strike and response will have to be executed within 6 minutes. Now, I don't know what the times of flight from China to India are, but the whole, say, hypothetically, China fires a nuclear weapon and we respond. It will be 6-7 minutes. So you have to have very high readiness levels. China, incidentally, has moved from NFU to launch on warning. But you can only do launch on warning if you have very sophisticated capacities in space, which takes me to my first argument, strategic deterrence in space. It will impact your nuclear posture. Now, there are wise men in the SFC establishment. I'm sure many of these things are being revisited. And the space is such that what they do, they cannot share with you. But debates in the public space will help them take these decisions. So I'm saying based on OSINT data, very good debates can happen. So if in India today we can get back to the quality of debates, When Mr. Subramaniam spoke of going overt with the in the nuclear domain, he was nicknamed Bomb Mama, as if he's one of those jingoists about the bomb. So that's the nature of the Indian debate. But I'm very sure that debates in the strategic military space always push decisions within. So we must focus on the refined debates, and people will take notice. So Mr. Rajamohan has done well. Ashley Tellis has done well. Sahad must now write the next article, which causes people to think.
Right, sir. So you spoke about strategic deterrence and in space particularly, which brings me to my next question, which is emerging domains, space forces, rocket forces, strategic support forces. Does India sort of see similar imperatives, and are we planning to follow suit? We have defense cyber and defense space agencies, but is there a desire to upgrade these two commands?
Yeah, so here I must critique my alma maters. They are rather slow to respond, and I've been somewhat alone in the ring in trying to say that we must upgrade our strategic and space capacities. I made many informal pitches, formal pitches. But on a more serious note, I'll tell you why space and cyber needs to be uh, upgraded. Let's do it with practical examples. Since 2014, Microsoft and Amazon cyber teams were deployed in Ukraine to take care of, what Putin may do to the Ukrainian space cyber domain. And after 2022, when the invasion took place, February, massive attacks were launched. They were so massive that the space and cyber domain of Ukraine was seriously threatened. Even the American satellites of the US Spacecom and the NASA and whatever services they were beaming to Ukraine were degraded. Who came to their rescue? Starlinks, Elon Musk, and not so much Spacecom and not so much NASA. And of course, we know what he did with those LEO satellites, high speed, high bandwidth, off grid internet. It enabled Zelensky to communicate with global councils, United Nations, British Parliament, American Congress, European Union. And that was very important for the narrative of that time. It enabled him to communicate for street resolve, Ukrainian civilian morale, to communicate with his troops. It was also used for artillery targeting. But for space, this war may have been lost. Look at cyber. The attacks were so massive on Ukrainian cyber that Ukraine was forced to migrate to cloud in 14 days. Look at India. We have such a good DPI. We have done very well in the data space. But as we have invested in data, the attack surfaces have grown. Our vulnerabilities have increased. We have wonderful plans for force mobilization, civilian mobilization in war. What are our plans for cyber mobilization? Will we be forced to migrate to cloud in Duress? Now, this is space and cyber. They need very deep examination. And if this is the threat, then space cyber agency will not do. They must become combatant commands. The only command which has been given combatant command status in recent times in US is the Space Command. Cybercom. When Cyber Command was not of a combatant command status, when it was something like a space agency, and 2016, the last election was 2016, the attack when they occurred, first elections, the cyber attacks, the boss of the Cyber Command learnt of the cyber attacks through the morning newspapers. When they got upgraded, next time the Russians did the attack, 20 or so, Cybercom was in full control. So you need to upgrade these capacities. See, in my view, what's happening? These attacks that are happening in, say, Ames, they happen, power grid of, you think they are isolated attacks? They are attacks, part of that whole larger game of whoever it is, possibly China, to test our defenses. And these are just tests. The massive attack may come once. The one which happened on the British National Health Service in 2017 was actually a cyber weapon which the American NASA had developed and which landed in the help of the Chinese and the North Koreans. That cyber attack today can be AI enabled. If it is AI enabled, it will be impossible to stop. Therefore, space and cyber need to be upgraded massively. Next time, say, along with a skirmish along the LAC, if there is a massive cyber attack on one of our cities, what will be the signaling from China? So we need, I think, greatly to invest space. What the Chinese have done, they have got the rocket force. The strategic support force is an amalgamation of space, cyber, and EW. They are even a step ahead. They have amalgamated space and cyber. In both USA and China, space and cyber have become separate services. It is like Army, Air Force, Navy, and space. So ये agency business जो है, in my view, it is a rather modest step. We have to shed some of that modesty and become more real.
Right, sir. So that space cyber needs upgrading, especially in this era of networked warfare, and so that would require technical capacities, which brings me to my last question.
If I can just give you one example of space, it's a very remarkable example. Now, the Ukrainians were using their crew drones to target the Russian um, Black Sea Fleet, and the drones were just crewed. They were so accurate that they have pushed the Russian Black Sea Fleet out of Sevastopol, and they have enabled the opening up of the grain corridor. With no navy, of a very poor navy, this is what space has done. And which is this space? Starlinks. So what happened in one of those engagements? The Russians told Musk that, listen, if you allow this to happen now, we will escalate the whole war in terms of strikes. So Musk switched off Starlinks. He switched off Starlinks and the Ukrainians couldn't target. Even when Zelensky made a personal request to him, he kept it switched off. Now, is Musk CEO of Stars? What is that, SpaceX? Or is he National Security Advisor? This is the importance of space, and this is the importance of big tech in warfare. When Biden was told that this is what Musk has done, he admonished the US military. He said, if he can make Starlinks, what are you doing? In consequence, they have contracted Musk to do Star Shield. Star Shield is the military equivalent of Starlink. And today, the partner of Spacecom is not NASA, it is not Boeing, it is not Lockheed, it is Elon Musk. The American military has had to eat humble pie. But that is the significance of space. When I was growing up, space was an exclusive club of countries. USSR, USA, even India. Musk has made a country thing, a company thing. I couldn't imagine that companies will launch rockets into space. This brings us back to the first argument. We must grow in space. What will make us grow in space is innovation. And perhaps those Indian startups which have started, Agnikul or some, those are the future. ISRO is very good, but ISRO's expertise is in the exploration space. It is not in the combat domain. And the kind of satellites we have today, 4A, 4B, are fat, juicy targets in war. We don't need that kind of space architecture. We need LEO, small survivable targets. So the entire space paradigm needs to be revisited in this light. And therefore, it needs to be revisited, upgraded. Now, if you don't want, I'm not saying 3 star, 4 star, that's not important. It can be a 2 star, but with prominence, with greater funding. He should be a permanent invitee to the Chiefs of Staff Committee. The larger change will happen when the Army, Navy, and Air Force say that please give us space. वो क्यों नहीं मानते हैं? क्योंकि वो जो समझ नहीं है. If I make one last suggestion, you see, we can, in my view, afford to spend on defense more. So perhaps we could do this. We could say give $30 billion over the next 3 years. Give it to the CDS, but to be invested only in the emerging domains. You will not take a penny from here and put it elsewhere. Because if you allow that, it will go, I assure you, it will go into the LAC, and disappear. So perhaps enhanced targeted spending only for the emerging domains, space and cyber. That could be a way of growing our prowess in these very, very critical emerging domains.
Right. These emerging domains, they would require, technical capacity, soldiers, officers with technical capacity, which sort of brings me to my last question. And this is on the Agnipath scheme that the government has introduced. And the argument there is that, it will give the armed forces a more youthful profile and, more tech savvy individuals. And obviously, behind the scenes, there would also be concerns about, let's say, right sizing the military. But so where are we on this on Agnipath today? Because there are reports, the armed forces have mentioned that uh, the Agnipath, the Agniveers are competing amongst each other to be retained in that 25% bracket. So where is India on the Agnipath scheme today, and like the pros and cons it sees?
So, I have been a open advocate of the Agniveer scheme consistent. I find no reason for me to revisit my stance. And let me put it this way, having revisited my stance, I find no reason to change. See, let me give it to you this way. What was Agniveer? Agniveer was a scheme which General Rawat had talked about it. General Ravne had talked about it. So it's not something that has been dumped on us by the politicians. At a point in time, we were also in agreement with it. The current CDS and the 3 service chiefs are in complete agreement. So I do not know where the problems are. Now, there are some problems which have been put up. So let's engage with those arguments. It has 3 dimensions. It has recruitment, which is intake. It has in-service training, and it has exit. Now, what was happening in recruitment, these were old patterns. We were taking trained drivers and training them for 3 years. What is the logic? No military in the world trains for more than 25, 26 weeks. Say we wanted good people in space, EW, cyber. Our recruitment methodology was such that we would get, say, 50,000 people, make them run. In that run, maybe these chaps go out, then take people in and train them for these kind of specialist jobs. So there was, rejigging in the intake process by a system of online discrimination, so on, various Western models. It was to refine those recruitment models to get what you want. So our recruitment models were reformed. And as you see our track, I was involved in it, and there was unanimous agreement on what needed to be done. So the recruitment model will get upgraded. Now, of course, the 3 services have some very different requirements. The Air Force and the Navy are very different from us. So all this has been led to the service chiefs. Are we saying that we do not have the confidence in our service chiefs and a CDS to do these kind of minor reforms? Is this going to be led by debates from outside? So that is the first argument. Now see intake training. Today, a chief minister does not get to choose his district magistrates. They are chosen by UPSC. You have this great opportunity where, say, my regiment, there are 80 Agniveers. They will train for these 4 years. Then the CO will get to choose the best 40. Absolute talent identification and retention. And because they are competing, it will be better. Competition is always good for humankind. It is good for society. It is good for nations. The CEO chooses the 40 best. I just visited my unit a month back. Many of my friends have visited the unit. They find no problems. Agniveer is a scheme. You please do your own check in units. It is universally applauded. We will get better people. तो अभी अगर intake में there is no quarrel, in-house training there is no problem. Now is the problem of exit. Exit. Before Agniveer, across government departments, there was about 10 to 15% reservation. The reservation was implemented in the breach. It was never honored. By some reason, qualified nahi hai, ye nahi hai, wo nahi hai. And since they were not qualified, civilians came in those vacancies. Today, because of government commitment, because of commitment by people like Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, Kalyani, many big groups, they are saying that they will recruit Agniveers. Now, I'll give you a hypothetical case. Say 50 people Agniveers after 4 years land up in Pune. These 50 people have been trained for 4 years by one of the finest institutions in the country and the world, the Indian Army. 4 साल की training दी है. If I'm owning a private company in Pune and I have 10 vacancies, I will be foolish not if I don't pick at least 6 of them. Foolish. In a larger sense, if we know that 5 to 6 years from now, 1,000 Agniveers are exiting, then the Ministry of Defense, in concert with UPSC and other organizations, not make sure that the exit is smoother? It may not be 100%, it will be 90%, 80%. And once these people exit, if they go to a civilian government job, a private sector, a startup, aren't you getting trained manpower here? So it is a win-win-win scheme if it is implemented properly. No, it is not cast in iron. The Prime Minister has said many times, the Raksha Mantri has said many times that we will tweak it. 75, 50, all those things will be tweaked. I've also heard of talk that the Agniveer, say somebody who lays down his life, even his benefits will be, a relook is being taken. Now, having done all this, if we save on pensions, if the profile becomes younger, what is our quarrel? So in the long run, it is a good HR scheme for the Indian nation. And yes, we should be prepared to engage with all kinds of disagreements. Whatever those disagreements are, they will get tweaked. They must be conveyed to our CDS, the 3 service chiefs and the Raksha Mantri. And I have complete trust. Why will a service chief or the CDS not be able to take care of the what is wrong in it? Now, if I, as Raj Shukla, sitting outside the army, say, this is what should be done, this is the only way it should be done, and I don't trust my chiefs to do it, I will do it. That is not a fair argument. But I'm saying engage with all their infirmities. Engage with all the infirmities.
This has been a riveting conversation. We've covered a variety of topics. It was a real pleasure to have you on Interpreting India, sir. Thank you for being
with us. Thank you very much, sir. Great pleasure to be speaking to your audience through you, and great pleasure to interact with Carnegie. You guys are doing a splendid job. All the best. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the invite.
Thank you, sir. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. To make sure you don't miss it, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from. To learn more about our research and team, you can visit us at carnegieindia.org. You can also find us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you for listening. See you next time.